It is only day 2 of the general election campaign, and so far we've heard speeches from 3 parties. And they've all taken, well, a pretty general approach to policy so far. So what do they need to do to win over the public? Joining me now, Mathew, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for Public Policy, and Mark Littlewood, Director General of the Institute of Economic Affairs. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us. Mark, can I start with you, and let's turn our attention first to the Labour Party. In terms of the policy prospectus that Jeremy Corbyn has been putting to the people since he became leader of the Labour Party, in your view, how well received has it been?
Not very, and you can see that from Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party's share of the vote and approval ratings in the polls. It is true that if you look at any individual policy, say renationalising the railways or spending more on the National Health Service, then when you poll that one policy, it does seem to actually get public approval. But when they're aggregated together, it seems that people are concerned that it doesn't add up as a package. And I think what we're likely to see from the Labour Party over the next 6 or 7 weeks is rolling out a whole range of spending proposals, in effect. We've heard from them today on education, that class sizes are too big. They're already supporting free school meals for everybody. And I think that whilst each of those policies might sound attractive to the electorate, people are going to ask, how on earth are you going to pay for all of this in the round? I don't think there is a single area of government spending that the Labour Party wishes to cut. Jeremy Corbyn might wish to cut Trident, but the Labour Party doesn't. So it's a big, big spending bill. And whilst individual elements of that might look attractive, the aggregate effect of it, I think, is bewildering to try and understand how on earth it can be paid for.
Mathew from the IPPR. I mean, is that your view, that when bundled together as a collection of policies, it's impossible for Jeremy Corbyn's left and socialist programme to be taken by the electorate?
Well, we'll have to see what the totality of the package is, but I think the fundamental issue of this election is how do we get the economy match fit for Brexit? Because if we actually look at the fundamentals of the British economy, there are some fundamental weaknesses there. Less than half of all households have seen meaningful income growth since the mid-2000s. Of the regions of the UK, only London and the South East have got GDP per head that's recovered to its 2008 sort of peak. And underlying that are some really big weaknesses on investment, on productivity, on inequality, in which we lag behind a lot of our competitors. So rather than looking at sort of the retail offer, I think what we want in this economy is to be looking at the fundamentals of how do we drive up investment, productivity, and distribute the sort of wealth that we collectively create more fairly across the regions of the country.
I want to dive into economic policy in a bit more depth in just a second, but Mark, surely the messenger, the one delivering the policy, is significant in all of this. I mean, this morning we've had Ed Miliband criticising rumours that Theresa May is going to be taking forward that cap on energy prices. You know, at the time that Ed Miliband announced it, it was labelled Marxist. One imagines that charge is not going to be labelled at Theresa May.
I wouldn't expect it would be levelled at Theresa May. I happen to think that the policy is equally stupid, whether it's being supported by Ed Miliband or the leader of the Conservative Party, but that's neither here nor there. I'm surprised Ed Miliband's criticising it. I would have thought he'd be delighted for the government to be adopting his policies. But of course the messenger is important. In fact, there's probably a better correlation between looking at leader approval ratings in the opinion polls and the final outcome than there is at looking at party vote share in the opinion polls and the final outcome, something the pollsters haven't actually really managed to hit a bullseye on for some considerable time. So yes, the messenger matters, but and I agree with what's just been said. How you get the underlying economy right for Brexit and the challenges and the opportunities that Brexit brings, I think is going to be a key and core issue. It's not just going to be about school class sizes and how much money should be spent on the National Health Service. At the moment, the Labour Party's prescription to get Britain match fit seems to be a colossal hike in government spending. When aggregated, it could be the biggest increase in government spending supported by any mainstream political party over the last 30 or 40 years. It's going to be interesting to see what the Conservatives say in their manifesto. And if the speculation is right, actually the Conservative manifesto will be extremely thin. There will be very few pledges in it. There will no doubt be some warm words, but there won't be a whole range of specific commitments which have actually tripped up the May government on the basis of the Cameron-Osborne manifesto from last time. So I'm expecting actually quite a lot of generalities from the Conservatives and quite a lot of enormous spending commitments from the Labour Party. How the electorate then interpret that when they have to decide how to vote on June the 8th, well, that's up to them.
I mean, Mathew, so much of the way that we vote comes down to perceptions of ability, of whether or not the Labour Party or indeed the Conservative government have earned the trust of the electorate when it comes to the handling of the economy. I mean, take the Labour Party, for instance. So much of the last 7 years has been the Conservatives have spent knocking their economic competence. How does Jeremy Corbyn put forward a package of ideas for the economy that serves to challenge the notion that every time a Labour government is in power, borrowing increases in the same way that spending does?
Well, I mean, the challenge, I guess, for all parties is to try and distinguish between the rhetoric and the reality. So even though the Conservative attack lines are around rising debt and rising spending, we actually see that under the last 7 years, most of these issues have actually gone up. So I think, you need to look at the policies in totality. So if you have monetary policy, which is loose when interest rates are low, then both the Bank of England, the IMF, a whole range of neutral institutions are saying now is the time to invest. And the idea that there isn't room for productive investment in the British economy, I think would strike most people as not particularly sort of withstanding scrutiny, particularly when we know that, as mentioned, the UK economy is unproductive relative to its main rivals. We aren't match fit for Brexit. We produce in 5 days of work what the average German or French worker produces in 4 days.
But Mathew,
I think the other thing is,
on that point,
I think
Mathew,
Mark's right there about...
Sorry to interrupt, Mathew, but on that point, why, let's take, for example, missed targets on deficit reduction, the increase to debt and so on, and the topics that you're raising about productivity. I mean, the Conservatives have been in charge for quite a long time now. Why has that not negatively had an impact on Theresa May's popularity, indeed for the Conservatives' popularity?
Well, I think the unfortunate truth for people who work in think tanks is that policies aren't the only game in town when it comes to politics. Clearly, there's rhetoric, there's powerful interests and interplays, there's cultural issues. And I think you saw earlier in the week, relating to the announcement of the election, how much this will be about a cultural election as much as it will be about a policy election. And I think Mark's right there about we shouldn't expect the Conservatives to have too much detail in their proposals.
Mark, back to you. You mentioned that you think the Conservative manifesto is going to be pretty thin gruel. What of the Labour manifesto? I mean, there is an opportunity, given that the left is in charge of the party at the moment, for them to put forward a truly radical socialist agenda for change. The question then becomes, of course, will they do that? And if they do it, will it have any success whatsoever?
I'm pretty sure they will do it, that there will be huge pledges for massively enhanced state control and state spending in virtually every area. I can't identify any part, as I say, of public spending in which the Labour Party think there should be reductions. And I think the problem with that, and I know this is a piece of cliched political rhetoric, is I think that the electorate are sharp enough that they know that there are tough choices, I think is the term that the Conservatives are often using, tough choices. There are, in other words, trade-offs. If you want to spend more on primary school education, for example, what is the trade-off in terms of taxes going up or spending less on, say, the National Health Service or pensioner benefits or something else? And I think if the Labour Party in their manifesto doesn't accept that there are trade-offs and think that they can just have a list of commitments as long or longer